They say your 28th birthday is supposed to be unremarkable. Not quite 30, past the excitement of your 20s, just another year sliding by unnoticed. For Victoria Hayes, unremarkable had been the story of her entire life. Until the night Andrea Greco called her into his office with murder in his eyes and asked her to stay. Not for the night, not for the job, but for something far more dangerous. Because the hardest part about being invisible isn't that no one sees you. It's what happens when the wrong person finally does. Welcome back to Mafia Folklore. Before this story begins, tell me something. Where are you watching from, and what time is it there? It helps us know how far the legend of the Mafia travels tonight. Now, let's begin. The office was empty, except for the hum of computers and the distant rumble of delivery trucks in the loading bay below. Victoria sat at her desk on the third floor of Greco Imports, her eyes burning from staring at spreadsheets for the past 4 hours. The clock on her monitor read 9:47 p.m. Her phone buzzed. A text from her sister. "Happy birthday! Sorry I can't make it tonight. Rain check?" Victoria typed back a quick "no worries" and set the phone face down on her desk. 28 today. She'd imagined this birthday differently when she was younger. Surrounded by friends, maybe a surprise party. Someone who cared enough to remember without needing a calendar reminder. Instead, she was alone in an office that smelled like coffee and old carpet. Double-checking import manifests because Marco from shipping had forgotten to do it before he left at 5. Again. She rubbed her eyes and reached for her lukewarm coffee, then noticed something sitting beside her keyboard. A small cupcake on a napkin, vanilla with pink frosting. A post-it note was stuck to the napkin in handwriting she recognized as Rosa's, the cleaning lady. "Happy birthday, Victoria. You work too hard." Ear. Victoria's throat tightened. She picked up the cupcake carefully, like it might disappear if she wasn't gentle enough, and took a small bite. The frosting was too sweet, the cake a little dry, but it was the first time anyone at Greco Imports had acknowledged her birthday in 3 years. She was halfway through it when her stomach dropped. The manifest on her screen. Shipment 4721B. She'd approved it this morning without running the secondary verification because Marco had assured her it was standard. But now, looking at the line items again, something felt wrong. The quantities didn't match the weight specifications. The origin port was listed as Naples, but the container codes were for Palermo. Victoria's hands went cold. She pulled up the verification protocol and ran the numbers again. The discrepancies glared back at her in red. No, 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 no. She'd approved a fraudulent manifest, one that could trigger a full audit, one that could expose. Her office phone rang, the sound sharp and jarring in the empty space. Victoria stared at it for 3 rings before she picked up. "Victoria Romano," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Ms. Romano." The voice on the other end was clipped, professional. "Teresa," Andrea Greco's executive assistant. "Mr. Greco would like to see you in his office." Victoria's heart slammed against her ribs. "Now?" "Yes, now." The line went dead. Victoria sat frozen, the phone still pressed to her ear. Andrea Greco didn't call people to his office at 10 o'clock at night unless something was very, very wrong. She stood on shaking legs, smoothing down her wrinkled blouse, and caught sight of herself in the darkened window reflection. She looked exhausted, small, forgettable. "He's going to fire me." The thought echoed through her mind as she walked toward the elevator, each step feeling heavier than the last. She'd worked so hard to keep this job. The pay was good, the benefits were better. And despite the long hours and thankless work, it was stable. Safe, or it had been, until she'd screwed up. The elevator ride to the executive floor felt like descending into a place she didn't belong. The doors opened to reveal a hallway lined with dark wood paneling and soft lighting that made everything feel expensive and untouchable. Andrea Greco's office sat at the very end, behind double doors that looked more like they belonged to a cathedral than a shipping company. Victoria's heels clicked against the marble floor. Each step felt like a countdown. She reached the doors and knocked softly. "Come in," a voice said from inside. Low, controlled, the kind of voice that didn't need to be raised to command a room. Victoria pushed open the door and stepped inside. Andrea Greco's office was exactly what she'd imagined, and nothing like it at the same time. The space was massive, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. A desk that looked hand-carved from some dark, expensive wood, leather chairs that probably cost more than her car. But it wasn't opulent. It was stark, almost cold. And behind the desk sat Andrea Greco. Victoria had seen him before, of course, in passing, at company meetings where he stood at the front of the room and spoke in that calm, measured way that made everyone listen without him ever raising his voice. He was in his mid-30s, tall, with dark hair that was just slightly too long to be corporate. He wore his suits like armor, and everyone who worked at Greco Imports knew the rumors. That he wasn't just the CEO, that the company was a front for something darker, that the tattoos hidden beneath his expensive shirts told stories most people didn't live to repeat. Now, sitting across the massive desk, Victoria could see those tattoos peeking out from his rolled shirt sleeves, dark ink that disappeared up his forearms. He wasn't looking at her. He was reading something on his tablet, his expression unreadable. Victoria stood just inside the door, her hands clasped in front of her, waiting. The silence stretched. Finally, Andrea looked up. His eyes were dark, almost black in the low light, and when they locked onto hers, Victoria felt like all the air had been sucked out of the room. "Sit," he said, gesturing to the chair across from him. Victoria moved forward on unsteady legs and lowered herself into the chair. It was too big, too comfortable. It made her feel even smaller. Andrea set down his tablet and leaned back in his chair, studying her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. "Do you know why you're here?" he asked. Victoria swallowed hard. "The manifest, shipment 4721B. I approved it without running the full verification. I know I should have caught the discrepancies, and I take full responsibility." "It's your birthday," Andrea interrupted. Victoria blinked. What?" "Today. It's your birthday." His expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. "You're 28. She nodded slowly, completely thrown. "Yes. How did you—" "I know everything about everyone who works for me." He said it like it was the most natural thing in the world. Date of birth, emergency contacts, performance reviews. Your sister lives in Boston. Your mother passed away 4 years ago. You've never taken a sick day. Victoria's throat felt tight. "I didn't realize you paid that much attention." "I pay attention to the people who matter." The words hung in the air between them, and Victoria didn't know what to do with them. Andrea leaned forward, resting his elbows on the desk. "You've been working here for 3 years, Victoria. You come in early, you stay late, you fix other people's mistakes." His voice dropped slightly. "And no one notices." Victoria's chest ached. "I just do my job." "You do everyone else's job too?" His eyes narrowed slightly. "Why?" "Because—" She stopped, unsure how to answer. "Because that's what you have to do to keep a job like this." "Is it?" Andrea tilted his head slightly, still watching her with that unnerving intensity. "Or is it what you've convinced yourself you have to do, because you're afraid that if you stop—" People will realize they don't need you? The words hit like a punch to the stomach. Victoria looked down at her hands, her vision blurring slightly. I don't know what you want me to say. I want you to tell me the truth. Andrea's voice was softer now, but no less commanding. Why did you approve that manifest without checking it? Because Marco told me it was standard, and I trusted him. Her voice cracked. I was wrong. I should have checked anyway. I should have... She looked up at him, tears burning behind her eyes. Please don't fire me. I'll work weekends. I'll take a pay cut. I'll do anything. Just, please. The silence that followed was suffocating. Andrea stood slowly, and Victoria's heart dropped into her stomach. This was it. This was the moment he told her to pack her things and never come back. But instead of walking toward the door, Andrea moved around the desk and leaned against it, his arms crossed over his chest. He was close now, close enough that she could see the faint scar along his jawline, the way his shirt stretched across his shoulders. Stand up, he said quietly. Victoria stood on shaking legs. Andrea studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he said something that made her world tilt sideways. Stay with me. Victoria's brain short-circuited. I'm sorry? Tonight. Stay with me tonight. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Her mind raced through 1,000 possibilities. What did that mean? Was this a test? A threat? Something worse? I don't understand, she finally managed. Andrea's jaw tightened slightly. There's a problem, Victoria, and you're going to help me fix it. What kind of problem? The kind that gets people killed if we don't handle it carefully. His eyes locked onto hers. Someone's been altering manifests to skim from shipments. They've been doing it for months, and they've been using your approvals as cover. Victoria's stomach dropped. I didn't know. I know you didn't. His voice was firm, certain. But now that I've realized what's happening, I need your help to figure out who's responsible. Why me? Because you're the only person in this building who actually pays attention to the details. Andrea pushed off the desk and took a step closer. And because I trust you. The words landed like a confession. Victoria stared at him, her heart pounding. You don't even know me. Don't I? Andrea's voice dropped lower. You think I haven't noticed you, Victoria? You think I haven't seen the way you stay late to fix problems that aren't yours? The way you never complain, never ask for recognition, never demand what you're worth? He paused. I've been watching you for 3 years, and tonight, I need you to stop being invisible. Victoria couldn't breathe, couldn't think. All she could do was stand there, frozen under the weight of his attention. So? Andrea said quietly. Will you stay with me? She should say no. She should walk out of this office and never look back. But something in his eyes, something raw and honest and utterly unexpected, made her nod. Yes, she whispered. I'll stay. Andrea's expression softened, just slightly. Good. He moved back to his desk, pulling out a file folder thick with documents. Then let's get to work. Victoria moved closer, her legs still unsteady, and looked down at the papers spread across his desk. She didn't know it yet, but in that moment, standing in Andrea Greco's office at 10 o'clock on her 28th birthday, agreeing to help a man everyone feared, Victoria Romano had just stepped out of the shadows, and she would never be invisible again. Victoria stood beside Andrea's desk, staring down at the maze of documents spread across the dark wood surface. Shipping manifests, container logs, customs declarations, all marked with her approval signature at the bottom. her signature, her responsibility, her mistake. "These are all the shipments from the last 6 months," Andrea said, his finger tracing a line down one of the spreadsheets. "Notice anything?" Victoria leaned closer, her eyes scanning the numbers. At first, everything looked normal. Standard import codes, reasonable quantities, proper documentation. But then she saw it, a pattern she wouldn't have noticed if she wasn't looking for it. "The weights," she said quietly. "They're off. Just slightly, maybe 5 to 10%. "Exactly." Andrea's voice held a note of approval that sent an unexpected warmth through her chest. "Someone's been skimming product from legitimate shipments and covering the shortage by altering the weight specifications. Small enough that customs doesn't flag it, but large enough to make a profit. And they've been using my approvals to make it look legitimate," Victoria finished, her stomach twisting. "Yes." She straightened, wrapping her arms around herself. "Why didn't you fire me? If my name is all over these fraudulent documents—" "Because you're not the one committing fraud." Andrea looked up at her, his dark eyes steady. "You're just the person someone chose to hide behind, and I need to know who." Victoria's mind raced. It has to be someone in shipping, someone who has access to the manifests before they come to me for approval. "Marco," Andrea said, the name landing heavy in the quiet office. Victoria's breath caught. "Marco Santini, head of the shipping department. The man who'd worked at Greco Imports for 8 years, who had a wife and 2 kids, who always remembered to say good morning even when no one else did." "Are you sure?" she asked, though even as the words left her mouth, pieces were clicking into place. Marco always staying late. Marco always offering to help with her paperwork. Marco, who'd been so insistent she approved that manifest this morning without the full verification. "I'm never sure until I have proof." Andrea turned to face her fully, his expression hardening. "That's where you come in." "What do you need me to do?" "Go through every manifest Marco touched in the last year. Find the pattern. Give me dates, amounts, destinations." He paused. "Can you do that?" Victoria thought about her tiny apartment, her empty refrigerator, the birthday that had already passed unremarked. She thought about 3 years of making herself small, of accepting scraps of recognition, of believing she didn't deserve more. Then she looked at Andrea Greco, the man everyone feared, who was looking at her like she was the only person in the world who could help him, and made a choice. "Yes," she said. "I can do that." Something shifted in Andrea's expression. Not quite a smile, but close. "Good. We'll order food. This is going to take a while." 2 hours later, Victoria's eyes were burning again, but this time it wasn't from exhaustion. It was from focus. She'd found 12 shipments with the same subtle discrepancies, all processed within the last 10 months, all signed off by Marco before coming to her desk. Andrea had ordered Italian food from a restaurant that clearly knew him well. They'd delivered it directly to his office, no questions asked. He'd remembered she was vegetarian without her having to mention it, and the eggplant parmigiana sitting half-eaten beside her keyboard was the best thing she'd tasted in months. "Here," she said, turning her laptop so Andrea could see. He'd rolled his chair around to her side of the desk, close enough that she could smell his cologne. Something dark and expensive that made her hyper-aware of how close he was. 12 shipments, all with the same 5 to 10% weight discrepancy. If you calculate the value of what's been skimmed, she pulled up another spreadsheet. It's over $2 million. Andrea's jaw tightened. Cristo. There's more. Victoria pulled up another document. I cross-referenced the destinations. Most of these shipments were supposed to go to our usual distributors, but 6 of them, She highlighted the rows. 6 were diverted to a warehouse in Red Hook that's not in our system. Whose warehouse? That's the thing. The ownership is buried under 3 shell companies. But she clicked through to another screen. The primary contact listed on the lease is Antonio Bianchi. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Andrea stood abruptly, his chair rolling back. He walked to the windows, his hands shoved in his pockets, his shoulders rigid. Victoria watched him, her heart pounding. Is that bad? The Bianchi family. Andrea's voice was controlled, but she could hear the edge beneath it. They're not just competitors. They're rivals. If Marco's been selling to them? He turned to face her. It's not just theft, Victoria. It's betrayal. The kind that starts wars. Victoria's mouth went dry. What are you going to do? I'm going to have a conversation with Marco. His expression was carved from stone. And then I'm going to make sure the Bianchis understand that stealing from me comes with consequences. Andrea, you should go home. He moved back toward the desk, already pulling out his phone. I'll have someone drive you. Wait. Victoria stood, her hands pressed flat against the desk. You asked me to stay, to help you fix this. I'm not done. Andrea looked at her, really looked at her, and for a moment she saw something vulnerable flicker across his face. This isn't your world, Victoria. These aren't your problems. Maybe not, she said. But you made them mine when you asked me to stay. The silence stretched between them, heavy with something Victoria couldn't name. Andrea's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his expression darkening. Marco just left the building. He knows something's wrong. Then you need to move fast. I am. Andrea typed something rapidly, then looked back at her. But first, I need to make sure you're safe. I'm fine. I'm right here. Not for long. He moved around the desk, stopping in front of her. Close. Too close. If Marco realizes you're the one who found the discrepancies, if the Bianchis find out you helped me, his jaw worked. You become a target, Victoria, and I can't. He stopped himself. Can't what? She asked quietly. Andrea's eyes searched hers, and in that moment, Victoria saw past the armor he wore. She saw exhaustion, fear, something that looked almost like longing. I can't let anything happen to you, he said, his voice rough. The words hung in the air between them, impossibly intimate in the quiet office. Victoria's breath caught. Why? You barely know me. Don't I? Andrea's hand came up, his fingers brushing against her wrist where it rested on the desk. The touch was feather-light, but it sent electricity racing up her arm. You think I haven't noticed you, Victoria? You think I don't see the way you carry everyone else's weight? The way you never ask for anything for yourself? His voice dropped lower. I've been watching you for 3 years, and tonight? He paused. Tonight, you stopped being just another employee. Victoria couldn't breathe, couldn't think. All she could feel was the warmth of his fingers against her skin and the intensity of his gaze. What am I now? She whispered. Andrea's thumb traced a small circle on the inside of her wrist, right over her pulse. I don't know yet, he admitted. But I know I can't let you walk out of here unprotected. Before Victoria could respond, Andrea's phone rang again. He pulled away, the loss of contact almost painful, and answered. Talk to me, he said, his voice immediately shifting back to business. Victoria couldn't hear the other side of the conversation, but she watched Andrea's expression darken with each passing second. When? A pause. How many? Another pause. Lock down the building. No one in or out without my clearance. He ended the call and looked at Victoria. We have a problem? What kind of problem? Marco didn't run alone. He made a call 20 minutes ago. Andrea's expression was grim. The Bianchis know I'm onto them, and they know you helped me figure it out. Victoria's blood turned to ice. How? Marco must have had someone watching the building. Maybe cameras in the shipping department, maybe... Andrea shook his head. It doesn't matter how. What matters is they know, and they're coming. Coming here? Not here. They're smarter than that. Andrea moved to his desk, pulling open a drawer and retrieving something Victoria couldn't see. But they'll be watching your apartment, your regular routes, anywhere they think they can get to you. So what do I do? Andrea turned to face her, and in his hand was a set of keys. You come with me, right now. Victoria stared at the keys. Where? Somewhere safe. His eyes locked onto hers. Somewhere I can protect you. Every logical part of Victoria's brain screamed at her to say no, to call the police, to run far away from this man and his dangerous world and never look back. But the part of her that had spent 28 years being invisible, being overlooked, being disposable, that part whispered something different. He sees you. He's choosing you. He's asking you to trust him. Victoria took a shaky breath and nodded. Okay. Relief flooded Andrea's expression. Okay. He crossed to her in 3 strides and took her hand, not a touch this time, but a grip. Firm, protective, possessive. Stay close to me, he said. Don't let go. And as Andrea Greco led her out of his office, through empty hallways that suddenly felt full of shadows, Victoria Hayes realized something terrifying. She didn't want to let go. Even if holding on meant stepping into the most dangerous night of her life. Have you ever felt invisible at work? Like no one notices how hard you try? What would it take for someone to finally see you? Tell us in the comments below. The car was sleek and black, the kind that looked expensive even in the dark. Andrea opened the passenger door for Victoria, his hand still holding hers, as she slid into the leather seat. The interior smelled like him. Dark cologne and something else, something that felt like safety, even though logic told her she should be terrified. He closed her door and moved around to the driver's side, his movements quick and efficient. The moment he started the engine, his phone rang through the car's speakers. Talk, Andrea said, pulling out of the parking garage. Boss, we've got eyes on Marco. The voice was male, young, urgent. He's at the Red Hook warehouse, 3 cars with him. Bianchi soldiers. How many? At least 8 that we can see. Andrea's jaw tightened. Keep watching. Don't engage. I'll be there in an hour. What about the girl? Victoria's stomach flipped at being referred to as the girl, but Andrea's response made her breath catch. She's with me, he said, his voice hard. And she stays with me. Anyone asks, that's the only answer they need. Understood, boss. The call ended, and silence filled the car. Victoria stared out the window as the city blurred past, lights streaking like falling stars. Where are we going? She asked quietly. My place. Andrea glanced at her, his expression softer now that they were alone. It's the only location I trust completely. Your place, Victoria repeated, trying to wrap her mind around it. As in, your home? Yes. Andrea, I can't just... You can, he interrupted gently. And you will, because right now, it's the safest place for you to be. Victoria turned to look at him properly. In the dim light from the dashboard, she could see the tension in his jaw, the way his hands gripped the steering wheel just a little too tight. He was afraid. For her. "I'm sorry," she said softly. Andrea frowned. "For what?" "For getting you into this mess. If I'd just checked that manifest properly." "Stop." His voice was firm, but not unkind. "This isn't your fault, Victoria. Marco's been stealing from me for months, maybe longer. You're not the problem. You're the reason I finally caught him." "Still." "No." Andrea reached over, his hand finding hers where it rested in her lap. His fingers laced through hers, warm and solid. "No apologies." "Not from you." The touch sent warmth spiraling through her chest. Victoria looked down at their joined hands, at the contrast between his scarred knuckles and her unmarked skin, and felt something shift inside her. "Okay," she whispered. They drove in silence for another 15 minutes, leaving the warehouse district behind and heading toward the outskirts of the city, where buildings gave way to tree-lined streets and houses that looked like they belonged in magazines rather than real life. Andrea pulled through a gated entrance, the iron bars sliding open automatically. The driveway curved through manicured gardens before opening onto a massive estate. Modern and minimalist, all clean lines and floor-to-ceiling windows that glowed with warm light. Victoria's breath caught. "You live here?" "I do." Andrea parked in front of the main entrance and turned off the engine. "It's too big for one person, I know. My father built it thinking he'd fill it with grandchildren." His expression darkened slightly. "That didn't happen." Before Victoria could ask what he meant, Andrea was out of the car and opening her door. He offered his hand, and she took it, letting him help her out. The moment her feet touched the ground, exhaustion hit her like a wave. The adrenaline that had carried her through the last few hours was fading, leaving behind bone-deep weariness. Andrea must have seen it in her face because his expression softened. "Come on, let's get you inside." The interior of Andrea's home was nothing like Victoria expected. She'd imagined something cold and imposing, all marble and sharp edges. Instead, she walked into warmth, hardwood floors, comfortable furniture, art on the walls that looked collected rather than purchased. There were books everywhere, stacked on side tables and filling built-in shelves. A half-finished puzzle sat on the coffee table. It looked lived in, like a home, not a showpiece. "This way," Andrea said, his hand on the small of her back, guiding her toward a staircase. He led her upstairs to a guest room that was bigger than her entire apartment. The bed looked impossibly soft, piled with pillows and a duvet that practically begged to be slept in. French doors opened onto a balcony that overlooked the gardens. "The bathroom's through there," Andrea said, pointing to a door on the left. "There should be everything you need. Tomorrow I'll have someone bring clothes for you. But for tonight..." He moved to a dresser and pulled out a t-shirt. "This should work." Victoria took the shirt, her fingers brushing against his. The fabric was soft, worn, and when she held it up, she could see it was way too big for her. "Thank you." Andrea nodded, but he didn't leave. He just stood there, his hands shoved in his pockets, looking at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "What?" Victoria asked softly. "I'm trying to figure out if I should apologize," he said. "For what? For dragging you into this? For putting you in danger? For..." He stopped, his jaw working. "For being selfish enough to want you here anyway." Victoria's heart stuttered. "Andrea, you should rest," he said, cutting her off before she could finish. "If you need anything, my room is at the end of the hall. Don't hesitate to knock." He turned to leave, and before Victoria could talk herself out of it, she reached out and caught his hand. Andrea stopped, looking back at her with surprise. "I'm glad I'm here," Victoria said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I know that probably sounds crazy. I know I should be terrified, but—" She took a breath. "For the first time in 3 years, someone actually sees me, and that someone is you. So no, I don't think you're being selfish." Andrea's expression cracked, something raw and vulnerable flooding his features. He turned fully to face her, his hand tightening around hers. "You're remarkable," he said quietly. "Do you know that?" Victoria's throat tightened. "I'm really not. I'm just—" "You're brilliant," Andrea interrupted. "You found a pattern in 2 hours that my people missed for months. You're brave. You agreed to help me even though you knew it was dangerous. And you're here, standing in front of me, telling me you're glad to be here when most people would have run the first chance they got." He stepped closer. "So, yes, Victoria, you're remarkable." She couldn't breathe, couldn't think. All she could do was stand there, drowning in the intensity of his gaze. "Get some rest," Andrea said again, but his voice was softer now, rough with something that sounded like longing. "Tomorrow's going to be difficult." He released her hand and walked to the door, pausing in the threshold. "Victoria?" "Yes?" "Happy birthday." Then he was gone, the door clicking softly shut behind him. Victoria stood in the center of the room, Andrea's t-shirt clutched in her hands, and realized she was crying. Not from fear or sadness, but from something else entirely. For 28 years, she'd been invisible. And in one night, Andrea Greco had made her feel like the only person in the world who mattered. Victoria couldn't sleep. She'd tried. She'd showered, changed into Andrea's t-shirt, which fell to mid-thigh and smelled impossibly like him, and climbed into the massive bed. But every time she closed her eyes, her mind replayed the night's events. Marco's betrayal, the Bianchis, the way Andrea had looked at her when he said he couldn't let anything happen to her. At 2 a.m, she gave up. She padded out of the guest room and down the hallway, her bare feet silent on the hardwood floors. The house was quiet, dark, except for a soft light coming from downstairs. Victoria followed it, moving through the living room toward what looked like a study. The door was ajar, and through the gap, she could see Andrea sitting at a desk, his back to her, staring at multiple computer screens. She knocked softly. "Can't sleep either?" Andrea turned, and the exhaustion on his face made her chest ache. "No." He gestured to a leather chair beside the desk. "Come in." Victoria crossed the room and sat, tucking her legs beneath her. "What are you doing?" "Trying to figure out how deep Marco's betrayal goes." Andrea's voice was tight. "If he's been working with the Bianchis for months, there's no telling what information he's given them." "About the company?" "About everything." Andrea ran a hand through his hair, making it stand up in ways that would have been endearing if the situation wasn't so serious. "Roots, contacts, vulnerabilities." He paused. "You." Victoria's stomach dropped. "Me? If they know you helped me identify the pattern, they'll assume you know more than you do. That makes you valuable, or dangerous, depending on their perspective." Andrea turned his chair to face her fully. "Either way, you're a target now." "For how long?" "Until I eliminate the threat." His expression hardened. "Which I will." Victoria believed him. The certainty in his voice left no room for doubt. "Can I ask you something?" she said quietly. "Anything." "Why me? You have dozens of employees who could have helped you with those manifests." People who know the shipping business better than I do. People who... She stopped. People you actually know? Andrea was quiet for a long moment, his dark eyes studying her face. Then he stood and moved to the window, his hands shoved in his pockets. 3 months ago, he said, his voice low. I was in the office late. It was maybe 2 in the morning. I walked past your floor and saw your desk light on. You were there, asleep with your head on your keyboard, surrounded by files that weren't even your responsibility. Victoria's cheeks flushed. She remembered that night. She'd been covering for someone in accounting who'd called in sick. I woke you up, Andrea continued. Asked you what you were doing. You looked at me like you'd been caught committing a crime, and you apologized. You actually apologized for working too hard. He turned to face her. And I realized something in that moment. What? That you were the only person in my entire organization who gave a damn. Not because you were trying to impress me. Not because you wanted a promotion. But because you actually cared about doing things right. His jaw tightened. Everyone else is in it for money, power, protection. But you were just trying to do a good job. To be useful. To matter. Victoria's vision blurred with tears. Andrea. So when I needed someone I could trust tonight, he continued. Someone who wouldn't have their own agenda. Someone who would just help me because it was the right thing to do. He crossed back to her, kneeling in front of her chair so they were eye level. There was only one person I thought of. You. A tear slid down Victoria's cheek. Andrea reached up, his thumb catching it, his touch impossibly gentle. You've been invisible for so long, he said softly, but not to me, never to me. Victoria couldn't hold back anymore. She leaned forward, closing the distance between them, and pressed her forehead against his. I don't know how to do this, she whispered. I don't know how to be seen. Then we'll figure it out together, Andrea said, his hands coming up to cup her face. Because I'm not letting you disappear again, Victoria. Not now. Not ever. They stayed like that for a long moment, breathing each other's air, balanced on the edge of something terrifying and beautiful. Then Andrea pulled back slightly, his eyes searching hers. Get some sleep, he said, his voice rough. I'll be right here. I'm not going anywhere. Victoria nodded and stood, but she paused at the door. Andrea? Yes? Thank you for seeing me. His expression softened. Thank you for letting me. When was the last time someone asked for your help instead of just your time? How did that change the way you saw yourself? Tell us in the comments below. Victoria woke to sunlight streaming through the French doors and the smell of coffee drifting up from downstairs. For a moment, she forgot where she was. Then reality crashed back. Andrea's house, Marco's betrayal, the Bianchis. Her birthday had been 24 hours ago, but it felt like a lifetime. She found clothes laid out on the chair beside the bed. Jeans, a soft sweater, undergarments still in packaging. Everything in her size. Andrea must have had someone deliver them early this morning. After dressing quickly, Victoria made her way downstairs, following the coffee smell to a kitchen that was all white marble and stainless steel. Andrea stood at the counter, his back to her, pouring coffee into 2 mugs. He was wearing dark jeans and a black t-shirt that showed off the tattoos covering his arms. Intricate patterns she hadn't seen clearly before. Morning, she said softly. Andrea turned, and despite the exhaustion still evident in his face, he smiled. Morning. Sleep okay? Better than I expected. Victoria accepted the mug he offered her. Thank you for the clothes. Of course. He leaned against the counter, studying her. We need to talk about what happens next. Victoria's stomach tightened. Okay. My people tracked Marco to the Red Hook warehouse last night. He's definitely working with the Bianchis. Andrea's expression hardened. But it's worse than I thought. He's been feeding them information about my entire operation. Shipment routes, supplier contacts, security protocols. Everything. Can you stop him? I'm working on it, but there's a complication. Andrea set down his coffee. The Bianchis want a meeting, today. They claim they want to negotiate a truce to discuss mutually beneficial arrangements. That's good, right? If they want to negotiate, it's a trap, Victoria. Andrea's voice was gentle but firm. They don't want to negotiate. They want to gauge how much I know, how strong my position is, and they want to see if you're with me. Victoria's blood ran cold. Why would they care about me? Because Marco told them you're the one who figured out their scheme. They think you might know more than you do. Details about their operation, evidence that could hurt them. He paused. They want to neutralize you before you become a bigger problem. Neutralize, Victoria repeated. The word tasting like ashes. You mean kill? Andrea crossed to her in 2 strides, his hands coming up to frame her face. I'm not going to let that happen. Do you hear me? I will not let anyone hurt you. But if they want a meeting, I'll go alone. You'll stay here with my security team. The estate is fortified. No one gets in without clearance. Victoria shook her head. If you go alone, you're walking into a trap too. It's my job to walk into traps and come out alive. His thumb brushed across her cheekbone. It's not yours. Andrea. His phone rang, shattering the moment. He pulled it from his pocket, his expression darkening as he looked at the screen. I have to take this, he said, stepping away. Victoria watched as he moved to the far side of the kitchen, his voice dropping too low for her to hear. But she could read his body language, the tension in his shoulders, the way his free hand curled into a fist. Something was wrong. When he finally ended the call, he stood there for a long moment, his back to her, before turning around. What is it? Victoria asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know. That was Salvatore, my second in command. Andrea's voice was carefully controlled. Marco isn't at the warehouse anymore. He disappeared sometime during the night. Where did he go? That's the problem. We don't know. Andrea moved back to her. But Salvatore's people picked up chatter. The Bianchis are moving up the meeting timeline. They want it to happen in 2 hours, not this afternoon. Why the rush? Because they're planning something. Andrea's jaw tightened. And I need to figure out what before I walk into it. Before Victoria could respond, Andrea's phone rang again. This time, he answered on speaker. Talk to me, he said. Boss, we've got a situation. It was a different voice this time, older, gruffer. Someone just tried to breach the east gate of your property. My guys stopped them, but what, Lorenzo? It was a woman. Says her name is Angela Romano. Claims she's Victoria Hayes' sister. Says it's an emergency. Victoria's heart stopped. Angela? That's impossible. She's in Boston. She's here, boss. Lorenzo interrupted. And she's pretty insistent about seeing her sister. Victoria grabbed Andrea's arm. Let me talk to her, please. Andrea's eyes searched hers. Then he brought the phone closer. Put her on. There was rustling. Then a familiar voice came through. Tight with panic. Victoria! Vic, are you there? Angela? Victoria's voice cracked. What are you doing here? How did you? I got a call this morning. Some man, he said. Angela's voice broke. He said you were in danger. That if I wanted to keep you safe, I needed to come get you and bring you to an address in Red Hook. He said if I didn't... She was crying now. Vic, he knew where I live. He knew about Daniel. He threatened my family. Victoria's stomach dropped into her shoes. Angela, listen to me very carefully. Do not go to that address. Do you understand? It's a trap. But he said... He's lying. I'm safe. But you need to leave right now. Get Daniel and the kids and go somewhere public. A police station. Somewhere with people. Victoria, what's going on? Angela's voice was terrified. Who are these people? I'll explain everything, but right now you need to trust me, please. Andrea took the phone back. Lorenzo, bring her inside. Full security protocol. And call Salvatore. I want eyes on her family in Boston. Now. He ended the call and looked at Victoria, his expression grim. They're using my sister to get to me, Victoria said, her voice shaking. Oh God, Andrea, if something happens to her... It won't. Andrea pulled her against his chest, his arms wrapping around her tightly. I promise you, Victoria, nothing is going to happen to your sister or her family. Victoria clung to him, her mind racing. This was her fault. All of it. If she'd just checked that manifest. If she'd just said no when Andrea asked her to stay. If she'd just remained invisible like she was supposed to. Stop, Andrea said firmly, pulling back to look at her. I can hear you spiraling. This is not your fault. Isn't it? No. His voice was steel. This is Marco's fault for betraying me, the Bianchi's fault for being greedy, my fault for not catching it sooner. His hands tightened on her shoulders. But not yours. Never yours. A knock on the kitchen door interrupted them. Lorenzo appeared, a tall man with silver hair and sharp eyes, with Angela beside him. Victoria's sister looked exactly how Victoria remembered. Tall, confident, always put together. Except now her makeup was smeared, her eyes were red, and she looked absolutely terrified. Vic! Angela rushed forward, pulling Victoria into a fierce hug. What the hell is going on? Who are these people? Who is he? She gestured toward Andrea. It's complicated, Victoria started, but Andrea stepped forward. I'm Andrea Greco, he said, his voice calm and professional. Your sister works for me, and right now, she's in danger because she helped expose a theft operation within my company. The people responsible are trying to use you to get to her. Angela stared at him, then at Victoria, then back at him. You're the mafia boss. It wasn't a question. Yes, Andrea said simply. And my sister is... Angela's eyes widened. Oh my God, Vic, what did you get yourself into? I didn't mean to, Victoria said, her voice small. It just happened. Things like this don't just happen. Angela's voice rose. You work in an office. You approve shipping manifests. How does that turn into this? Because I paid attention, Victoria said quietly. Because for once in my life, someone asked me to help, and I said yes. Because I was tired of being invisible. The words hung in the air. Angela's expression softened. Vic, Mrs. Romano? Andrea interrupted gently. I understand you're frightened, but right now, we need to make sure both you and your sister are safe. I have people watching your family in Boston. No one is going to hurt them. How can you promise that? Because anyone who tries will have to go through me first. Andrea's voice was absolute. And I don't lose. Angela studied him for a long moment, then looked at Victoria. You trust him? Victoria didn't hesitate. Yes. Okay. Angela took a shaky breath. Then what do we do? Before Andrea could answer, his phone rang again. He looked at the screen, and his expression went cold. It's them, he said. The Bianchis. He answered, putting it on speaker. Mr. Greco. The voice was smooth. Cultured, dangerous. I trust you received our message. I did, Andrea said, his voice flat. If you touched her family? Now, let's not be hasty. No one's been touched? Yet. A pause. We simply wanted to ensure we had your attention. You have it. Good. Then here's what's going to happen. You're going to bring Victoria Hayes to our meeting, both of you, together. You're going to hand over all evidence of our arrangement with your dear Marco. And in exchange, we'll forget any of this unpleasantness ever happened. And if I refuse, then Mrs. Romano's family in Boston will have a very unfortunate accident, as will her sister, as will you. The voice hardened. Don't test me, Greco. You may think you're untouchable, but everyone has pressure points. We've just found yours. The line went dead. Silence filled the kitchen. Victoria felt like she couldn't breathe. This was it. This was how it ended. Andrea would either hand her over to save Angela's family, or he'd refuse, and people would die. Either way, she'd become exactly what she'd always feared. The problem everyone wished would disappear. No, Andrea said suddenly, his voice cutting through her spiral. Victoria looked up at him. What? No, he repeated, his jaw set. I'm not giving you to them. I'm not letting them win. And I'm sure as hell not letting them make you feel like any of this is your fault. But my sister's family will be protected. Andrea turned to Lorenzo. Call Salvatore. I want everyone we have on Angela Romano's family. Armed guard, 24/7, until this is over. Boss, if we pull that many people, do it, Andrea commanded. And get Dante on the phone. Tell him I'm cashing in the favor he owes me. I need his people in Red Hook within the hour. Lorenzo nodded and pulled out his phone, stepping away. Andrea turned back to Victoria and Angela. Here's what's going to happen. I'm going to that meeting, alone. But I'm not going unarmed, and I'm not going unprepared. They want both of us, Victoria said. If you show up without me, then they'll know I'm not negotiating. Andrea's voice was hard. And they'll have to decide if they want a war. Andrea, this is insane. No. He cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing away tears she didn't realize were falling. What's insane is expecting me to hand you over to people who want to hurt you. What's insane is thinking I'd choose anything. Money, power, peace, over keeping you safe. Why? Victoria's voice broke. Why would you risk everything for me? Andrea's expression softened, and when he spoke, his voice was raw with honesty. Because in 3 years of watching you, in one night of working beside you, in these few hours of having you in my home. He paused, his eyes searching hers. You've become the only thing that matters, and I don't know when that happened. I don't know how, but it did, and I'm not losing you, Victoria. Not to them, not to anyone. Victoria couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. All she could do was stare at this man, this dangerous, powerful, terrifying man, who was looking at her like she was the most precious thing in the world. So, you're going to stay here, Andrea continued, with your sister, with my security team. And you're going to trust that I know what I'm doing. And if something happens to you, Victoria whispered, it won't. But if it does... Andrea leaned forward and kissed her forehead, the touch achingly gentle. Then you take your sister and you run. Lorenzo will get you somewhere safe, somewhere they'll never find you." "Andrea, promise me, Victoria." She wanted to argue, wanted to fight, wanted to tell him she wasn't going to hide while he walked into danger because of her. But the look in his eyes told her this was the only way he could do this, the only way he could face what was coming. So she nodded. "I promise." "Good." Andrea pulled back, his mask sliding back into place. The vulnerable man disappeared, replaced by the mafia boss everyone feared. He turned to Lorenzo. "You have your orders. No one gets near them." "Understood?" "Yes, boss." Andrea looked at Victoria one last time, and in his eyes she saw everything he couldn't say. "I love you. I'm sorry. I'll come back." Then he was gone, the front door closing behind him with terrifying finality. Victoria stood frozen in the kitchen, Angela's arm around her shoulders, and realized something that made her blood run cold. She'd finally been seen. And now she might lose the only person who'd ever truly looked. The waiting was unbearable. Victoria sat in Andrea's living room, Angela beside her on the couch, while Lorenzo and 3 other security guards moved through the house like shadows. Every minute felt like an hour. Every sound made her jump. "He'll be okay," Angela said quietly, squeezing Victoria's hand. "He seems like someone who knows how to handle himself." "You don't understand." Victoria's voice was hollow. "The Bianchis aren't just criminals. They're a family that's been in this business for generations. They have resources, connections, people everywhere. And Andrea's walking into their territory alone because of me." "Not because of you," Angela corrected gently. "Because of Marco's betrayal. Because of their greed." She paused. "And maybe because he cares about you more than he cares about staying safe?" Victoria's throat tightened. "I've known him for one night, Angela. One night. This doesn't make sense." "Love rarely does." "I didn't say anything about love." "You didn't have to." Angela's expression was sad and knowing. "I saw the way he looked at you, Vic. Like you were the only thing keeping him human. And I saw the way you looked at him. Like maybe, for the first time in your life, someone actually made you feel like you mattered." Tears spilled down Victoria's cheeks. What if he doesn't come back? "Then we deal with it." Angela pulled her into a hug. "But until then, we hope, we trust, and we wait." An hour passed, then 2. Lorenzo's phone rang, and Victoria nearly jumped out of her skin. He answered quickly, his expression unreadable. "Understood," he said after a moment. "We'll be ready." He ended the call and looked at Victoria. "That was Salvatore. The meeting's happening now. Boss is inside." "Is he?" "We don't know yet." Lorenzo's voice was gentler than she expected. "But he's not alone. Dante's people are positioned around the building. If anything goes wrong—" A loud crash came from upstairs. Lorenzo's hand went to his weapon immediately. "Stay here," he commanded, gesturing to the other guards. "Paolo, Marco, with me. Enzo, stay with the women." The 3 men disappeared up the stairs, moving with military precision. Victoria's heart hammered. "What's happening?" "I don't know," Enzo said, positioning himself between the women and the staircase. "But don't move." The seconds stretched into eternity. Then gunfire erupted from upstairs, sharp staccato bursts that made Victoria's ears ring. Angela screamed. Victoria grabbed her sister's hand, pulling her down behind the couch. "Stay low," Enzo commanded, his weapon drawn, his eyes on the staircase. More gunfire, shouting in Italian, the sound of something heavy hitting the floor. Then silence. Victoria's breath came in short gasps. Beside her, Angela was shaking. Footsteps on the stairs, slow, deliberate. Enzo raised his weapon. "Identify yourself! It's Lorenzo!" The older man appeared at the bottom of the stairs, blood on his shirt but walking steadily. "We're clear. They came in through the balcony. 2 of them. They're down." "The Bianchis sent assassins?" Victoria's voice was barely a whisper. "Looks like it." Lorenzo's expression was grim. "They wanted to make sure you couldn't testify, regardless of what happened at the meeting." "So, Andrea is walking into a trap even bigger than we thought." Lorenzo pulled out his phone. "I'm calling Salvatore. We need to get people to that warehouse now." Before he could dial, his phone rang. He answered, his face going pale. "What?" He listened, his jaw tightening. "When? How many?" "Cristo." He looked at Victoria. "It's over. The meeting's over." Victoria's heart stopped. "Is he? He's alive, but there was a firefight. Multiple casualties on both sides." Lorenzo paused. "He's on his way back. He'll be here in 20 minutes. Relief flooded through Victoria so intensely she thought she might collapse. "He's okay?" "He's alive," Lorenzo repeated. "I don't know if okay is the right word." 20 minutes felt like 20 years. When Andrea's car finally pulled up to the house, Victoria was already at the door. She watched him emerge from the driver's seat, moving stiffly, his shirt torn and stained with blood. She ran. Victoria didn't think, didn't hesitate. She just ran down the steps and straight into his arms. Andrea caught her, stumbling slightly, but his arms wrapped around her immediately, crushing her against his chest. "You're alive!" Victoria sobbed into his shirt. "You're alive! You're alive!" "I'm here." Andrea's voice was rough, exhausted. "I'm right here." Victoria pulled back just enough to look at him, her hands framing his face. He had a cut above his eyebrow, bruising along his jaw, and exhaustion carved into every line of his face. But he was here. He was breathing. He was alive. "You're hurt," she said, her fingers trembling as they traced the cut. "It's nothing." Andrea caught her wrist gently. "Victoria, I need to tell you something." "What happened? Are the Bianchis—" "The Bianchis are done." Andrea's voice was flat. "Marco's dead. He tried to run during the firefight. Didn't make it." He paused. "Their leadership is decimated. The ones who survived will be dealing with federal prosecutors." "I made sure of that." "How?" "I've been building a case against them for months. Tonight just gave me the final pieces I needed to hand everything over to the FBI. His jaw tightened. "They're finished, Victoria. They can't hurt you. They can't hurt your sister. They can't hurt anyone anymore." Victoria's knees nearly buckled with relief. Andrea caught her, holding her steady. "It's over?" she whispered. "It's over." Victoria buried her face in his chest and sobbed. All the fear, the terror, the exhaustion of the last 24 hours pouring out of her in waves. Andrea held her through all of it, one hand cradling her head, the other wrapped around her waist, murmuring soft words in Italian she didn't understand but felt in her bones. When she finally pulled back, wiping at her eyes, she found Angela standing on the porch with Lorenzo, watching with knowing expressions. "You should get him cleaned up," Angela said gently. "He looks like he's about to fall over." Andrea huffed a laugh that turned into a wince. "She's not wrong." Victoria led Andrea inside and up to his room, a space she hadn't seen before. It was surprisingly simple. A massive bed, dark furniture, windows overlooking the gardens. Personal, private. His. Sit, she commanded, pointing to the bed. Andrea raised an eyebrow but obeyed, lowering himself with a grimace. Victoria disappeared into the bathroom and returned with a first aid kit. She knelt in front of him, carefully cleaning the cut above his eyebrow. You didn't have to do that, she said quietly. Risk everything. Start a war. All of it. Yes, I did. Andrea's hand came up to rest on her waist. Because the alternative was losing you. And that wasn't an option. Why? Victoria's hand stilled, the antiseptic-soaked cotton poised above his cut. Andrea, we barely know each other. Why would you? Because I've been alone for 10 years, Andrea interrupted, his voice raw. Because I built walls so high no one could reach me. Because I convinced myself that caring about someone meant giving them power to destroy me. He cupped her face with both hands. And then you walked into my office, terrified and brave, and so determined not to disappear, and everything I thought I knew shattered. Victoria's vision blurred with fresh tears. I'm just a girl who approves shipping manifests. No. Andrea's voice was fierce. You're the woman who saw patterns no one else saw, who stood up when everyone else stayed silent, who looked at me, at the monster everyone fears, and somehow found something worth saving. His thumb brushed away her tears. You're Victoria Hayes, and you're remarkable, and I'm never letting you be invisible again. Andrea, stay with me, he said, and this time the words weren't a command or a request. They were a plea. Not because you're in danger, not because you owe me anything, but because I can't imagine waking up tomorrow and not finding you here. Victoria's breath caught. You're asking me to move in with you? I'm asking you to build a life with me. Andrea's expression was vulnerable in a way she'd never seen. I know it's fast. I know it's crazy. I know you have every reason to say no. But I'm asking anyway. Because I'd rather risk rejection than spend another day wondering what could have been. Victoria looked at this man, this dangerous, powerful, impossibly gentle man, who'd torn down every wall he'd ever built just to make room for her. She thought about her tiny apartment, her invisible life, the 28 years she'd spent apologizing for taking up space, and she thought about the last 24 hours, the way Andrea had looked at her like she mattered, fought for her like she was worth protecting, held her like she was precious. Okay, she whispered. Andrea's eyes widened. Okay? Okay, I'll stay. Victoria's hands framed his face, mirroring his touch. Not because I'm afraid, not because I'm grateful, but because when I'm with you, I don't feel like I'm disappearing anymore. I feel like I'm finally becoming real. Andrea's expression cracked completely. He pulled her up from the floor and onto his lap, his arms wrapping around her like he was afraid she might vanish if he let go. I love you, he said against her hair, the words rough and honest. I know it's too soon to say it. I love you too, Victoria interrupted, pulling back to look at him. And yes, it's too soon, and yes, it's crazy, but it's also the truest thing I've ever felt. Andrea kissed her then, deep and desperate and achingly tender. A promise, a plea, a beginning. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Andrea rested his forehead against hers. Happy belated birthday, he murmured. Victoria laughed through her tears. Best birthday I've ever had. Even though you almost got killed? Even though. She kissed him softly. Because I also finally got seen. 3 months later, Victoria walked through Greco Imports with her head held high. She wasn't invisible anymore. everyone knew her name now. Not because she was Andrea Greco's girlfriend, though she was, but because she'd been promoted to director of operations, overseeing all shipping and logistics with a team that actually listened when she spoke. She had an office on the executive floor, her own assistant, business cards with her name embossed in gold. But more than that, she had a home, a life. A man who looked at her every morning like she was the most important thing in the world. As she passed Andrea's office, she caught sight of him through the glass wall. He was on the phone, his expression serious, but when he saw her, his face softened into a smile. He held up one finger, 1 minute, and she nodded, continuing to her own office. On her desk sat a small package wrapped in simple brown paper. No card, no name, but she knew who it was from. Victoria opened it carefully and found a framed photograph inside. It was from the night they'd met, taken by a security camera in his office. Andrea standing at his desk, Victoria across from him, the moment frozen right before he'd said, "Stay with me." Beneath the frame, a small note in his handwriting. "The night you stopped being invisible. The night I started being alive." Victoria traced her fingers over the words, her chest tight with emotion. A knock on her door made her look up. Andrea stood in the doorway, his hands in his pockets. That small, private smile on his face. "Busy?" he asked. "Never too busy for you." He crossed the room and pulled her into his arms, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Come home early tonight?" "Why?" "Because I want to make you dinner. Badly. And then I want to sit with you on the couch and watch you fall asleep during whatever movie you pick." He pulled back to look at her. "Because 28 years is a long time to be invisible, and I plan to spend the rest of my life making sure you never feel that way again." Victoria's eyes filled with happy tears. "That's a long commitment." "Good thing I'm planning on forever then." He kissed her, soft and sweet and full of promise, right there in her office with the door open for everyone to see. Because Victoria Hayes wasn't invisible anymore. She was loved, she was chosen, she was seen. And that made all the difference. Some people spend their birthdays wishing for things they'll never have. Victoria Hayes had done that for 27 years, but on her 28th birthday, she stopped wishing and started living. She stopped apologizing for existing. She stopped making herself small. And she discovered that the most dangerous thing she could ever do wasn't loving a man everyone feared. It was finally believing she deserved to be loved back. What would you risk to stop being invisible and finally be chosen? Tell us in the comments below. Thank you for watching Mafia Folklore. If this story touched your heart, subscribe and leave a comment below. We read every single one. And if you want more stories of love, danger, and redemption, well, you know where to find us. Until next time, stay safe, stay curious, and remember, every legend starts with a choice.